Well, I am pumped today because we are here with Meghan Keaney Anderson. She's the CMO of the Wanderlust Group. She was formerly the VP of Marketing at Hubspot. She's a working mom, and her career and leadership skills span from nonprofit to startups to global publicly traded companies. So, Meghan, you are an accomplished leader. I love your incredible heart, and I've been really inspired by the great cultures you've been part of and helped create. But I want to first start with just a bit of context by you sharing your personal experience. Like, how did becoming a mom change the way that you thought about your career path or goals or just your overall relationship with work?
Yeah, well, it gave me a lot of perspective, that's for sure. Things that used to really bother me or, occupy my mind started to roll off my back because I just got this zoomed out view of, where work and family and life kind of fit in for me. So it gave me a lot of perspective, which is great. It also took away a lot of time. I mean, the margin for error became razor thin. And so I had to change myself and get better at everything and fitting really concrete bits of work and responsibility into small chunks of time.
Yeah, totally. It makes you really prioritize. It makes you think about your time differently. And it's interesting because, this whole pandemic really caused a lot of people to rethink what they're spending their time on. We hear about the Great Resignation. There's so much to talk about there, but there's one aspect of how care is so systemic that without the systems of care being in place, it really made it impossible for a lot of parents and caregivers to actually continue to work. And so just curious to see from your experience of working with all these companies and being in leadership positions, how do you think employers really need to kind of redefine or, readjust the way that we live and work and what we expect from employees?
Yeah, I mean, the Great Resignation has multiple shades to it, right? There's the voluntary Great Resignation. These are people who, 2020 was an inflection point for them, and it gave them some perspective on how they wanted to spend their lives and their time, and made a choice to mix that up. And then there's the involuntary side of it, where the system just broke. 80% of the people who left the workforce in 2020 were women. And we're talking of millions and millions and millions of people and millions of women. And, what happened is we are duct taping together our these sort of amazing feats of coordination using family and hired help and our own kind of like finagling our own schedules to try to make life work. And when something changes in a major way, like what happened during the pandemic, the bottom falls out. And so the Great Resignation has to approach that as a company, you have to understand all the different ways that can manifest in someone's life. Because my experience as a two-earner family with local grandparents nearby, it's very different than a single parent's experience who has no one nearby to help out. And so companies need to take that into account for their own operations, but also for equality and for the survival of the larger industry.
Yeah. And I've been dying to ask you about the 4-day week. I know that you've been public about it. You've written a lot about it.
Yeah.
I actually have so many questions about, how that can be really effective. I love the idea of it. I don't understand how it really gets implemented in a large company. So can you talk about a little bit of the philosophy behind it and how you've seen it work?
Yeah, so my company, the Wanderlust Group, shifted to a 4-day work week in May of 2020. And what happened was the CEO, Mike Melillo, he just noticed how much strain everybody was under trying to balance everything and thought to himself, we could do this in less time. There's a ton of wasted time in the work week for many companies and industries. lots of standing meetings that like you just go to because it's on the calendar, lots of time spent, trying to debrief and rebrief and present internally. There's fluff in there. And so he said, all right, well, let's try it during the pandemic and see if we lose productivity. And quite the opposite, what he found was not only did employee morale go up and people were able to balance their lives a little bit better, but the company did well. They saw 100% year-over-year growth in ARR. The NPS of our customers stayed up at around 70%. And so, it was never intended to be a long-term thing, but seeing the results of it, the company decided to make it permanent policy.
Wow.
And I think, what's been really remarkable about it fits really well with our mission. So our mission is really to get more people to put down their screens and get outside. We're an outdoor technology company. We match boaters with marinas and campers with campgrounds. And so it's part of our mission of like, let's get people more time to do things outdoors. Mm-hmm. So that's great. But even the mission aside, what we've learned along the way is that having some extra time back actually can make you more productive in the working hours that you do have. So the company takes Mondays off, and I personally believe that because we chose Mondays, it's been more effective because it's not like an early release. It's not like you're spilling into the weekend and you're getting that sort of like jump start on your Saturday. It is really a day of solitude on Monday where you can, as a parent, my weekends are as chaotic as my weekdays are. Yeah. And so Monday, when my daughter is in school or with a caretaker and I don't yet have work, it's a time for me to get organized and to think and to reflect and to start Tuesday really strong and really focused. And so it's made a difference for me personally. It's funny, I think that back to kind of the balancing and juggling that we do, we ask a lot of our employees, how do you spend your time? And some people, they say, absolutely, like we go fishing, or I teach at a local sailing school, or I go for long hikes with my dog, and that's great. And we love that, again, as an outdoor focused company. But a lot of people also say, you know what? Monday has become my day for overflow errands. And I am so happy about that because what it means is that I don't have to do that, at 7 p.m. on a Tuesday when I should be hanging out with my child. I don't have to do that while I'm, supposing to be having a weekend. It gives me that buffer that I've lost along the way.
That's fascinating because I think going into it, before hearing you just talk about it, I always thought that if you squished work into 4 days, it actually makes it more stressful when you are together because you're like, oh no, don't talk about that. We got to get it done. And, just made it more intense. And then, yes, I thought that extra day was like, what do you do during that day? And is it better to kind of spread it across 5 days, but have a little bit more flexibility? But I understand what you're saying. You're almost saying you have a day of more quiet. You have a day where you could get all the other things done. So your 4 days of working is actually more focused versus more intense.
Yeah. And I think, there are a number of ways to do this, and I would be interested to see how other companies handle it. There's like legislation that's being introduced right now out of California to make this a standard. And there are countries that have tackled this. So every time a company or a country takes on a 4-day work week, we learn a little bit about how to do it better. But I do think that, one of the ways you could do it is just say, hey, everybody's got 1 day off a week and you can do it wherever is most flexible for you. And that is great for flexibility. But my theory, and I could be wrong, is if everybody's not taking off the same time, the emails aren't going to stop and the notifications aren't going to stop. And so you'll get pulled back into that work. My Mondays are truly very quiet. Our CEO pulled our Slack data, and you can see the noticeable difference. Slack, is almost non-existent on Monday, and then on Tuesday it pops right back up. But there is something about, there's the overt time off, but then there's actually the uh, the more subtle, informal time away and space that we give each other as colleagues on that day too.
Yeah, no, I love it. And what I do love is that it's a real tangible way of really adjusting and redefining this balance. And I think you guys are leading the way, and it's really inspiring to just witness and to hear your real thoughts and learnings behind it. To wrap up our time here, I'm curious to see if you had to pick one word or phrase to really describe what you want to really redefine or change in the way we live, work, and care, or caregiving, or any type of care in your life, what would that be?
I'd say that I just want us to spend less time surviving the day and more time experiencing it. I know that's not one word, but, picking up your kid from childcare is not a stressful thing. That's a moment of joy of seeing your kid again, of making that reconnection. What is stressful is the 15 steps that you took to get to that moment. Visiting your mom in the hospital is not, medical stuff aside, is not a stressful thing. That's a moment of joy and connection. What is stressful is the 3 meetings you had to cancel to get to that, or the extra work you're going to have to do tonight because of that. And so I think if we can start to pull away some of these, as I said, these immense feats of coordination and be more intentional about the time that we're spending with our families, that's a change I'd love to see in the world.
Oh, that got me right here. I mean, that is the core of why we do everything, is just, caring is one of the most important things that we'll ever do in our life. It's the most human core emotion and experiences. But you're right. A lot of times we survive it instead of experiencing it. And so that is a beautiful way to end this. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you for all that you do, Meghan.
Yeah, no, I'm so impressed with Iona Care and everything that you all do. And this idea of pulling together a network and making that part easier, I think is a really powerful thing, because I have frankly gotten by and to where, I consider myself to be really lucky because I am here on 2 things: on the unique flexibility of the employers that I've gotten to work for, and on just the endless, unceasing generosity of the family and friends around me who have picked up the slack when I needed it. And I love that you guys bring those 2 things together.
Yeah, that is exactly the combination. And you represent that so well. So we're definitely going to have you back on. There's so much more we could talk about. But thank you so much, Meghan. Really appreciate it.